We are interviewing today Alka Patel from who's a lifestyle doctor, and will be talking to us a little bit about what she does in her role and how I presume medicine can be improved by looking at lifestyle factors. That health is principally comes from lifestyle, and certainly not from pills and potions, as we might have presumed in the past. But I think generally the public is coming to an awareness now that lifestyle plays an important part in your health, mental, whether that be mental or physical. But maybe there's still a little bit of catching up to do on through our regular kind of GPs and doctors and our interactions with the medical profession at the moment. So let me welcome Alka Patel into the room. Alka, are you there?
I am here. Hello, hello.
Hi, Alka. Thank you very much for taking the time to join us today. So Alka, a little bit about yourself. You're a GP. You're trained as a GP. Is that correct?
So yes and no. So my background is as a GP. So I was a traditional GP for several decades until I found a new way. So I don't practice traditional, conventional general practice that most people are kind of used to now. But I have a very specific kind of slant that's very much associated with what you've already mentioned, which is lifestyle medicine. So I have my own lifestyle medicine and longevity practice.
Okay, good. And so, I mean, what caused you to shift into a more kind of lifestyle approach to your practice from, I guess, I mean, what is the difference really? Like, what is lifestyle medicine?
Yeah, really good question. And I've probably got my own kind of personal life story that I can share. But I think in essence, what happened to me, Lokesh, was I just became really thirsty, like really thirsty for medicine that made sense. And I discovered really that I was finding that the medicine I was practicing as a GP just stopped making sense to me. And there was a reason for that. And the reason was because I'd become a drug pusher.
Hmm.
Like I'd become a drug pusher doctor, I'd become a pawn for the pharmaceutical industry. And that is not why I went to medical school. And it's a lot about what we're taught as doctors, as medical students as well. But I needed to turn to something more because I wasn't providing my patients health. I was trying to make them healthier in terms of avoiding sickness, but health and sickness are two totally different things. So I turned to lifestyle medicine because I recognize this is very much about what I call common sense medicine. It gets you right to the root of life. And there's a thing here because it is your lifestyle that predicts your lifespan. Right? So
Yeah.
right? Your lifestyle predicts your lifespan. But I also thought I needed to go further than that. So there's also very traditional lifestyle medicine, but I've created my kind of own version because, I mean, look at this time that we're living in, right? We get to be alive right now. So I was really zoning into the realm of health hacking as well. And you might be going, well, what is that? What does that mean? So it's about giving you back control of your health. Like, I don't want anyone to drop their health into my lap as a doctor. I want you to hold responsibility for it. And as I said, this is an incredible time to be alive. So if we can get right to personalized data, right into cutting edge devices, do you know what? You can then make health decisions with so much more precision. So I'm not talking about off the shelf care. Like we end up doing the same thing that our friends do or the neighbor does or someone tells us to do. That's the off the shelf fads from Instagram. What I'm talking about is being much more strategic about your self-care, strategic self-care.
Okay. I mean, it's interesting that you say, you got tired of, pushing kind of pharmaceutical drugs, which is often the kind of criticism for somebody who's been in the alternative health world for the last 10 years, like myself, is often the kind of the main criticism that gets pushed is that, the modern medical system is just designed to kind of push pharmaceutical solutions on you in ignorance of any other possible solution. So, and actually, I've when speaking to doctors, I kind of struggle to communicate that question without feeling that I'm being offensive. So it's very refreshing to hear you saying that so openly. So, I mean, what kind of factors are really key, other than, I mean, there obviously is a use for pharmaceutical drugs in certain scenarios, but what kind of things impact people's health that you would kind of recommend people make changes towards? What kind of things do you look at?
Yeah, for sure. So let me just give you a quick tip in terms of having this conversation with others, because it's about positioning, Lokesh. It's not that drugs are the enemy. They're super, super important. I can prescribe, and I do prescribe beds, but it's the positioning. So when you're talking to others, think about positioning lifestyle first, not drugs first. And that's probably why my company, I've called it Lifestyle First, because it's about that. And also, it's not an alternative. There's parallels. Like, it's not that we don't need one without the other. It's just about what are we positioning first. And when I talk about lifestyle, it's really interesting, isn't it? There's so many words that we sort of band about, things like stress or burnout or diet or lifestyle. Like, what actually is lifestyle? What is lifestyle? So I love using hooks to help people kind of remember things. It's how I was taught in medical school as well. So I've zoned in on what I call the 10 key dimensions of lifestyle are. And they spell out the word lifestyle. So if anyone is listening, of course, people are listening. It's a radio show. Of course they're listening. Grab a pen, because these are those key elements, which I'll mention very quickly. But L is life purpose, identity, food, exercise, sleep, time out, your connections, learning habits, emotions, and first of all, commitment as well. So, thinking about lifestyle, it's all those components. And what we tend to do, what I've noticed, Lokesh, in a lot of people that I see, is that they've zoned in on one thing, and it's usually the thing they're quite good at, but they just want to get even better at. And then they ignore the stuff that really does need their attention. So you've got to switch that. You've got to really go for that big rock. So say you're really into nutrition and food, you'll then start to look at all the little ways that you can get a bit more magnesium in or a bit more B12 in, but you're not sleeping at all at night, right? And you're not dealing with that. So go for those big rocks. Look at all of those elements in your lifestyle and really think about, where can I get my biggest hit here? Where is that biggest win that I'm going to gain? What is it that I'm ignoring that I shouldn't really?
Okay, well, within lifestyle there, that you mentioned many different areas that somebody could look at. With, was it food only being one of them, the F in life? Saying that, maybe because this is my particular interest and something that I find very easy to kind of look into. I would say that, my understanding is that food plays a very, very important role in the lifestyle matrix, let's say. I mean, what percent would you associate to food in terms of making positive changes in people?
Oh, massive, like huge. Like you say, it's a huge foundational factor. Did I say huge? Yeah, huge.
Yes.
I would put it alongside food, exercise, and sleep. If you're going to go for what are those top three, then it's that. And and food comes with choice, right? And I'm so glad that you're using the word food rather than the word diet, which a lot of people I find tend to use. And then the moment you start using the word diet as opposed to food, it conjures up a whole different image. So yes, just a simple answer to your question is, the foundation of your health rests with how your hand moves to your mouth, ultimately.
And what kind of food? I mean, in terms of, are there some quick? Obviously, each individual person will need a kind of a deeper dive on an individual perspective. But are there some commonalities for all of humanity when it comes to food in terms of improving people's health?
Yeah, look, I think you've kind of hit the nail on the head. My approach is very, very much about personalization. General practice is very much a population-based approach to health, the greater good for the greatest number of people, but that doesn't connect to you directly on a one-to-one level at all, which is so important. And now we've got access to personal information about you that you can use. But to really kind of answer that question, there's probably two things. One is what to increase, and the other is what to decrease. So when I talk about food, well, I talk about trash food as well. Trash food is really about minimizing too much refined, artificial, sugary foods that harm. So really, really simple. And if we all just did that, if we all just removed those trash foods, the refined foods that don't really look like food, but we think they're food, we give them the name food, the artificial food, right, and the sugary foods, that would make such a difference to health span, longevity, energy, vitality, focus, clarity, all those things that we need as humans on a daily basis.
We had an interview with international best-selling author and Dr. Michael Greger,
Oh, love it.
You know, who wrote the book How Not to Die and How Not to Diet, and we've had him on a few times actually. And he actually said, probably I asked him what was the most dangerous common food in the regular diets, and without pausing, you know, he immediately shouted out excessive amounts of sodium,
Yeah, right on.
which is something that we often ignore, isn't it? But you're right, all these kind of extracted foods, processed foods, just removing them is what you're saying is just removing them from the diet. You generally see a marked improvement in people's health. Am I correct?
Yeah, because it's not just the food itself, it's what's in it, and it's the hidden things that are in it. I mean, most of us can't even look at the back of a label and understand it, right? It's like everything is so hidden. And one of the best hits I've had in terms of treating disease with a lifestyle approach is high blood pressure.
Hmm.
And we know that sodium is a big driver for that. And just again, by changing what people are eating and removing that level of processing and the highly processed foods as well, huge difference, huge difference. I've taken people right off their medication because we know it can make a big, big, big difference. Yeah.
Yeah, is the problem of sodium the fact that there's not enough potassium that comes along with it? You know, if somebody's consuming a large amount of sodium but were to have a large amount of potassium alongside it, would that mitigate some of the problems by any chance?
Yeah, I
Because
wish.
I notice in fresh foods and fresh fruits and vegetables, for instance, you know, there's a 2 or 3 times the amount of potassium than there is sodium
Mm.
in these foods before we add salt, basically.
Ye-
Um,
Yeah, and there is, but it's not such a direct equation. It's not up one and reduce the other or get them into an equilibrium at all. Because there's a lot more. We're also looking at, you know, things like your vitamin Bs and your omegas, and also hydration. So your fluid levels when it comes to
hmm.
sodium play a huge part. And again, most people don't drink enough water in the day. It seems so simple. I mean, your brain is 70% water. Like, give it what it needs, right? But even that call to thirst, we ignore it in the busyness of our day. People ignore thirst and sometimes mistake thirst for hunger. So you end up reaching out for the sugary, salty foods, but actually don't go and hydrate. So it's more of, there's a lot more in that kind of energy cycle in terms of supportive nutrients as well, Lokesh.
Okay. So dietarily, you know, things to avoid: processed foods.
100%.
What else would you recommend?
Yeah, so artificial and kind of refined sugars, so pure sugars, not because sugar is the enemy, right? But because we need sugar. It's a hugely important source of fuel for us, for our
The
brain, for
body runs on glucose, doesn't it? It's a primary
100%.
fuel
So,
source.
you know, everyone who's going around going, oh my God, sugar is the enemy, like just pause, because it isn't. But it's actually how you have it that's important. When you have it, we talk about a lot about what you eat, but there's also the importance of when you eat as well. And a big game changer for me with my clients, Lokesh, has been using sugar sensors, sugar monitors. So I never say, you know, carbs are the enemy. You and I will eat the same, I don't know, baked potato, bowl of pasta, totally different response. We put a sugar monitor on a sugar sensor, continuous glucose monitor, game changer. You now know exactly what sugar affects you and in which way.
Okay, so that's part of how you measure your patients. You know, how well they're doing, basically, or if they're improving or not. You use a sugar monitor. I think I saw that on the website.
Yeah, continuous glucose ones. And they're fun as well, right? I think we need to start making health a lot more fun. Such a heavy topic. And I love that we're having this conversation on here today in a little bit more of a kind of light-hearted but important way, because we have to start making health fun, and we have to make it focus, and we have to make it accessible in a way that's personalized. So things like sugar monitors, devices. The other thing that I find is that they also provide such an important nudge, right? This kind of, it's all very well knowing what to do. I mean, I sat in a GP surgery for years giving people advice, but most people didn't toddle out of my consulting room taking any of the advice that I gave, because just by knowing, you don't end up doing.
Hmm.
But once you can see your own information, it's like it's giving you that continual nudge to do something different, and then to see the difference that that's making, which nudges you even more. So yeah, game changer.
It's true. I mean, if you're diabetic and you're not measuring your blood sugars, how can you know what changes you're making or having any impact? So that kind of information I can understand as being really, really very, very, very useful. I mean, I remember a few years ago wanting to. I had much longer hair at the time, Alka, but I remember wanting to pull it out,
Believe
watching a
you.
watching a BBC documentary, which is on prime time. I think it might have been Horizon or something like that. And they were talking about the sugar epidemic in the UK. This is just before the sugar tax came in, I think.
Okay.
And they were likening, a bowl of potatoes with a certain amount of cubes of sugar. And I was just watching it in horror. And I can't imagine what kind of conversations I'm going to have tomorrow. And then, of course, we've moved to these low sugar drinks, which are full of artificial sweeteners. And then just in the last couple of days, we've had information from, I think, the WHO saying that aspartame is a probable or a possible cause of cancer. So it's really difficult, isn't it, with processed foods? I mean, there's even questions nowadays around, harvested foods, potatoes, bananas, etc., as to how they're grown and the ways that they've been grown and the things that have been used to grow them. And then we've got these processed foods, which, come with ingredients that we can barely pronounce, and it's hard to work out what the impacts are going to be on the body.
Oh, yeah.
Um, Sorry.
I think these debates are going to continue, aren't they? The whole kind of, artificial sweetener debate, the aspartame, is it carcinogen, isn't it? We don't have enough research, and nor are we necessarily going to get the right level of research that we need, because there are so many variables, which is why I always keep coming back to know yourself. Right, know yourself. I had a client this morning, Lokesh, I will just kind of briefly share. I do a kind of whole level of kind of profiling for gut health and metabolic health, and one of those is looking at toxins, just triggered by you mentioning soil just there. And this particular client grows some foods in her own garden and then eats them. And you would think on the surface of it, what an incredible thing to do, what a healthy way to eat. But what's in her soil? Because she had high levels of, one thing that stood out was barium in her toxic profile, like really high. Where's that coming from? So you think even by growing your own food, for example, you're doing it the right way and being, highly nourished. But until you test, sometimes you just don't know. So it comes back to, as you say, like, these are really difficult conversations to give very blanket advice on. I think most people know the general right thing, as we said, don't eat processed food too much. Like, have more fiber in your diet, fuel up on fiber, have a big plant slant to what you eat, get all those phytonutrients and polyphenols in, keep hydrated. You don't need a doctor like me on this incredible show like today kind of talking about it. We know this, like our moms told us this, right? Right? But there's something more complex going on. So this is the realm now, isn't it, where find out.
I mean, at the same time, there's a lot of confusion out there when it comes to the term, again, diets.
Yeah.
Maybe there would be less confusion if we use the term foods, but there is a lot of confusion around. Maybe there's just confusion, full stop, to be perfectly honest. So you've got people on one end of the spectrum recommending ketogenic diets or carnivore diets, and you've got people on the other end recommending vegan diets or very low fat diets as a mechanism for disease reversal. And it's the average person, it's not surprising, they're concerned with other matters, that they come to the topic of nutrition and they're just like, I'm so confused that I'll do nothing. It's safer just to do nothing than to try and act upon something when I'm not sure. So there is a lot of confusion out there. So do you recommend vegan diets, ketogenic diets? What kind of a dietary approach do you recommend?
Yeah, good question. Like you say, we get all this nomenclature bandied about. I think if we go back to the word diet, comes from the Greek word dieta, which very simply means way of life. And I love thinking of it like that. It really is. So it's not so much follow this restricted diet or follow that restricted diet. I'm not an advocate of any particular form of diet. And what I am an advocate of is very much having a strong plant slant to your food choices. I myself am vegetarian, so I don't eat meat myself. And actually, you mentioned Michael Greger. I was very triggered by his book, and once I knew what I knew, I couldn't unknow it. So that's my personal preference, and I've got data to back that up on me. I've measured lots of things about me, and then same with my clients. So when you're thinking about what is the one diet, yes, have a huge plant slant to your diet, because we know a lot more about the gut microbiome, how the bacteria in our gut really are now benefiting us and creating this kind of kind of cacophony of color in our food plates to really support their functions as well. So that's principally my direction. Doesn't mean that, you know, if you eat meat, I'm telling you to stop eating it at all. But again, it's very much focusing on what is helping and what is harming.
And I think that's very much the kind of the conclusion of the blue zone studies, which identified these 5 areas around the world, isn't it, where they have you know, remarkable longevity and very little illness into later life. And you know, some of these places are in, you know, far off, you know, locations like Costa Rica, Okinawa in Japan, and what have you. And in all cases, they're not vegetarian by any degree, but they you know, 95% plus of the food and the calories that they're consuming do come from plants, don't they? And particularly interesting is Linda Loma in California, where you know, because they're in America, they're in California, not renowned for the greatest food in the world or whatever, or the greatest diets in the world. And yet, despite the fact that they're surrounded by a lot of illness into old age amongst their peers, they seem to do remarkably well. You know, moving into to late old age, free of disability largely, and they're largely a you know, a vegan, plant-based, 95% plus kind of plants diet, aren't they?
Yeah, again, love that you're talking about the blue zones. I was actually in Costa Rica last year and went out into these very areas and met a man who was 104 years old.
Oh, wow.
I was, you know, just holding his hand and talking to him. It was, you know, one of the most memorable moments that I've had. But I didn't just meet him; I met the generations that came before, after him as well, and just incredible to see that. But it's back to what we talked about right at the beginning: is we talk about nutrition, and as you say, in those blue zones, there isn't one specific approach to eating that unifies them all, but it's all those elements in lifestyle that I talked about. They're incredible. Connected communities, right? And we know, again, loneliness kills. When we're talking about connectivity and longevity, there's a big correlation. They sleep when the sun sets and wake when the sun rises. Now look, how much of that do you bring back into this very current world that we live in, you know, over in the West? And I think there's principles that we can all follow in our kind of daily routines and our rhythms, and tapping into our circadian rhythms. And longevity is a big part of the outcome for all of us. I mean, how many humans would say they don't want to live a long, healthy life? It's what we all want, but we want to be healthy. We want our health span and our lifespan to match. And we can now reverse aging through all of these principles that we've talked about today. And that's what I love doing. I love to measure biological age in my clients. And then it's such an important number, Lokesh, right? Because there's such a lot of gravitas that we attach to age. It means something to all of us. And most people want to be younger because they want to live longer. And then that's exactly what I do. I reverse aging. We will be 10 years younger. I'm 30 years younger. I will just share that with you. Yeah, your eyebrows are raising. I can see you.
Well, I'm just saying, because I for the listeners, before we jumped onto the interview, I did ask Alka how old she was, and she told me that her biological age was very good, but didn't give me an exact number. And so I was just looking at you on video again, and I'm thinking she does seem quite learned, but she looks like she's about 22. So, you know, I'm not sure, I'm not quite sure, but you know, you obviously, you know, you're doing something right, Alka, by the looks of it.
Okay, thank you.
So look, anyway, Alka, we've reached the end of our time. We've gone a little bit over, in fact. I'm very thankful for you to come in and give us a bit of a sense as to your approach and how people can improve their mental and physical state. Just let us know, how can people find you? How can they get in touch?
Oh, yeah, for sure. My website's probably the easiest place, which is dralkapatel.com, dralkapatel.com. And in fact, if you go on there, I've got something on there, what I call your LQ. So like your IQ and your EQ, you can find out how much priority you're giving to your lifestyle. So all those areas that I mentioned. So that might be something really, really useful that the listeners are going to find very, very helpful. So head over there. I'm also on all the socials as well, Dr. Alka Patel UK. Love speaking to people. I respond to all my messages myself. So get in touch for sure and find out your LQ. That's going to be a really great way for us to stay in touch as well.
Lovely. For some reason, I seem to have missed that when I was looking at the website, so I'll go back and I'll do that. when I come off of the program. Thank you once again so much for making the time for us today. It's been an absolute joy. If you ever do come back, you're going to have to tell us what your real age or biological, one of the two anyway, is if we ever do get you back. But thank you very much for coming on and giving us the time today. That was Dr. Alka Patel.